Hello everyone, back to today's second video. Going to have a look at the weather for next week to 10 days. For today's second video, this is going to take us to around the 26th of October. So we've got high pressure going to be dominating really the next week to 10 days. Its position is going to be critical in terms of the feel of the weather though, because we're getting very late on into the year now, and even with relatively warm upper air temperature, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be overly warm on the surface. So temperature's going to be a bit up and down, and they'll be varying depending on the wind direction and the exact position of this high pressure. I think the trend through next week is to turn things rather cool, really, from the northwest. And then we're still sort of messing around with this potential northerly in the last week of October. Will we get it? Will the high pressure go far enough north to force the cold air out of the Arctic and down into the UK? Or will we just be on the periphery of that, with most of that going into Scandinavia? That's still an uncertain sort of period this final week of October, still causing some problems. But overall, high pressure is dominating, so there will continue to be a lot of dry weather. The ridge of doom, as I call it, that we've been in since May goes on, albeit in a slightly different position compared to where it was through the summer, when it gave us such hot and dry conditions. Anyway, I'll talk you through everything that's going on very shortly. At the end of the video, you'll see what CFSV2 is currently forecasting for the winter of 2018-19. I haven't shown you that for a little while. I'm going to start off with the situation in the tropical Atlantic, though. For all of that, though, just say that today's first video was the ECMWF 30-day ensemble look ahead. So that's taking us through into the early part of November with the ECMWF 30-day ensembles for the UK and for Europe. Have a look at that and see what you think to that one. So we're going to start off in the tropical Atlantic. There's not much going on, but there is one area of interest. This orange X just here over towards that southern part of the Gulf of Mexico and going down almost in towards kind of like South America. So let's see what the National Hurricane Center are saying about this. It's disturbance 1, and it has a 40% chance of cyclone formation in the next 48 hours. So it's a defined, a well-defined low-pressure system located near the northwestern coast of Honduras, continues to produce a large area of cloudiness and thunderstorms over portions of the far western Caribbean Sea and much of Central America. Although this system could still become a tropical depression before it moves inland over southern Belize by early this afternoon, any further development is unlikely due to land interaction. Once the low moves inland, rapid weakening is expected. Regardless of development, strong gusty winds are possible over portions of Belize and the eastern Yucatan Peninsula today, before diminishing by this evening. In addition, locally heavy rainfall which could cause flash flooding is possible across portions of Central America during the next few days. The Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft mission that was scheduled for this afternoon has been cancelled due to the disturbance's proximity to that, so not going to investigate it this afternoon. Formation of a cyclone in the next 48 hours is around 40%, and formation of a cyclone in the next 5 days is also 40%. I think that doesn't do anything in the next 24 hours. It's going to pretty much die away inland over Central America. Otherwise, things have turned rather quiet at the moment through the tropical Atlantic. We shall wait and see if there are any more developments in the days ahead. Right, so these are the GFS temperature and precipitation samples for the next couple of weeks. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. Looking at London today, so we're rather above average with those temperature samples at the moment. The upper air temperatures, they will be dropping down close to average in the days ahead. So they're going to become a little bit cooler for the middle part of the week, then lifting up for a couple of days early in the weekend, and then dropping away a little bit through the early part of next week. And then we've still got this final week of October just here. Notice 1st of November is now appearing at the very end of the ensemble time frame. So November just coming into time frame of GFS ensembles now. and you'll see still have this cooling trend through the last week of October. How cool it goes? Does it go cold? Do we see wintry showers coming into the north? Could we get night frost? There are still questions that we've got to answer for this final week of October. Lots of dry weather coming up as well, so there's barely any rainfall at all through to month's end now for London. The odd sort of area of precipitation here and there, not much, just showery bits and pieces of rain drifting down from the northwest on weak weather fronts at times. But considering this is from the middle of autumn, which is one of the wettest periods of the year on average, that does look very, very dry, I have to say. Now, as we go into this into the closing days of October, this period just here, there are more in way of precipitation spikes appearing as the temperatures are cooling off. But at the same time, it's not that many of them, really, even then, considering, again, it's in the middle of autumn, so you'd expect to get quite a lot of rainfall spikes. And it's in the unreliable time frame of the model anyway. Essentially, it looks like the next week to 10 days is going to have a lot of dry weather across many parts of the country. Temperature anomalies are looking like that from the 16th, 24th of October. We're coming out very close to average, a little bit above average for England and Wales, about average for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Not a big deviation anywhere in the UK and Ireland. Most parts of Europe, though, are warmer than average, quite substantially so, some places for the week ahead. And very dry. This is the precipitation anomaly from the 16th to 24th of October. Again, much, much drier than average for the UK, for Ireland, for France, all the areas that have been dry over the past few months, right way back to the summer. All those areas are still looking very dry in the week ahead. So they have that really wet day across many parts of England on Sunday. It's been a bit damp since then. It does look like we're going to be making up the rainfall deficit really here. We need consistent rainfall over several weeks to make up for this really dry spell we've been in. Just having one very wet day within sort of weeks of dry weather is not going to be enough to make up the deficit. So we do need now to start seeing signs of more protracted rainfall over a more sustained period. But certainly for the week ahead, it does look really dry again across much of the UK and much of Ireland as well. So here we go with the generic charts. So this is the midnight run. This is 6 o'clock run, I should say, of the GFS. So I'll show the midnight run first, because that comes first, and then we'll show you the 6 o'clock run. So this is the midnight run of the GFS, with the high pressure ridging in from the Azores into the UK on Friday. Low pressure with the jet stream is out to the northwest. Jet stream is running up there. Of course, lots of dry weather then for the end of week into weekend. These dry conditions continue, and for a time we're going to pull up some relatively warm air from the southwest over weekend, so temperatures might get to around 20 degrees on Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon down in the south. But as we go through to the early part of next week, that high pressure just repositions out to west of us a little bit, allows this cooler air to move in from the northern Atlantic. So after a relatively warm weekend, temperatures cool down early next week. The main emphasis, the main story is dry weather, dry through the weekend, dry into the early part of next week. That high pressure doesn't go very far at all through the course of next week, so it's still there, very close to the UK, dominating the weather, bringing plenty of dry weather. There will be weather fronts pushing through across the north at times next week, bringing showery bursts of rain, but basically the high pressure is in control up to day 10. That is the chart for day 10, and it's Friday the 26th of October, with the high pressure just edging out a little bit to our west again, starting to allow this rather colder northerly, northwesterly wind to come through. That northerly is basically shoved off into Scandinavia, though. So this is the 27th of October, just a little bit beyond day 10, and high pressure is essentially sitting over top of the UK. The air's quite cool, so although that looks like it should be a warm chart, it would be a very hot chart if it was in middle of summer. It's the middle of autumn, so it'll be quite cool by night. There could be mist and fog, there might be frost, and temperatures by day probably no better than around average, colder than that if any fog happens to be lingering on. Now, Now, in the very extended range of the midnight run of the GFS, we start to move that high pressure out to the northwest again. So you notice real northerlies are setting in over Scandinavia. Proper trough is dropping out of the Arctic into Scandinavia, bringing proper wintry conditions there through this final week of October, just on the edge of that, just on the periphery of that, with this high pressure still just centred to our west, but cold air is pulling to the north and the northeast of us. But essentially this high pressure is warding that off and keeping it across northern, northeastern Europe up to the 1st of November. There's the upper air temperatures. I mean, they are quite chilly, really, and we would be certainly at risk of night frost with that. And as I say, it could be some fog patches as well. But you'll notice the really cold air, the proper cold air, is actually just to the east and northeast. But it's a very close run thing. And of course, given it's in the unreliable time frame, that is subject to plenty of chopping and changing as well. But high pressure looks like it's dominating really right way through the rest of October, and generally centred just to our west. So now this is a 6 o'clock run of the GFS. This is the very latest. Again, Friday we have this ridge extending in from the Azores into the UK. It's a little bit more unsettled up across Scotland. Bit of showery rain up there. Over the weekend, high pressure dominates. It's going to be quite warm with that high pressure over the weekend. The air is coming up from the central Atlantic, so I think we could get temperatures to around 20 degrees this weekend. Not as warm as last weekend, where temperatures got to mid-20s Celsius. Won't be as warm as that, but could be a relatively warm sort of mid-October weekend. Early next week, though, we take that high pressure out to our west and we bring down this cooler northwesterly wind, so that will cool things down through the early part of next week, but still keeping this high pressure influence. So that's how things are looking in the middle of next week, 24th of October. High is sitting right over top of the UK, bringing lots of dry, fine conditions. As I say, it could be relatively cool by night if the skies are clear. They could well get low enough, at least for ground frost, maybe air frost. We might see some dense mist and fog patches as well. Always a bit milder and a bit more showery, I suppose, up across Scotland, with a little bit more of a west-southwesterly wind, but very dry conditions holding sway right way up to day 10. Now we get to day 10, which is Friday, 26th of October. It looks a little bit different to what the GFS is showing. We've got this low pressure out to the northwest, and that starts to bring cloud and rain in from the north and the west. And then we go to a rather more unsettled final week of October. We are having a go at turning the winds into the north, and certainly across Scotland we're bringing some quite cold air in from the north, so showers probably turning wintry there on the 30th of October. Just not weakening pressure enough to our south and southwest to allow that northerly to come down across the whole country. Again, it will only take a very subtle adjustment, and we will find ourselves in a proper sort of northerly wind. That's how we finish up with this 6 o'clock run at the GFS. It's Thursday, the 1st of November. Looks a little bit stormy then. There's gale force winds to the north of Scotland. And again, cold air is trying to dig down from the north around that area of low pressure. Notice it does look as though we're beginning to set up a cold pattern. It looks like we've got quite a lot of high pressure up here, kind of like Greenland, Northern Atlantic over towards eastern parts of Canada. It looks like we are setting quite a blocky sort of setup getting going there. And there's a bit of low pressure around the Azores as well. So it looks like we've got a bit of high pressure developing up here, low pressure down here. That will be sending the NAO into negative territory. And I suspect if we could roll on another couple of days, we would find that low pressure moving into Scandinavia, and we would probably open the door to a northerly through the first week of November. So it's still looking rather interesting for this last week of October. There's the upper air temperatures. You can see that they are actually relatively mild, but cold air is poised just to the north of us to start pushing down if we was to be able to run on beyond the 1st of November. So the hints are there still that there is a potential, anyway, for something colder to develop through the final week of October, possibly into the first week of November. He said we're looking like this. High pressure again ridging through the country on Friday, bringing lots of dry settle weather. High pressure still in control over weekend, and relatively warm weekend coming up as well. It turns cooler early next week as the high pressure positions itself out to west of Ireland. That starts to introduce cooler northwesterly winds. High pressure is in control through most of next week, bringing lots of dry, fine, if rather cool, rather chilly weather. We're up to day 10, and it looks as though, again, we're on the very edges of a northerly there. We've got the trough slinking down into Scandinavia. We've got high pressure just out to the west of us. So the cold northerly winds are going in that direction. A little bit of cold air is flirting with the east coast, but essentially we're still under the relatively mild-ish air from the Atlantic. I don't want to give you the idea that this high pressure is going to be a warm high pressure, because I think once this weekend is out of the way, actually temperatures will be quite cool, really, through much of next week. Certainly no better than average, and probably quite cold by night. But the Arctic air, the proper wintry air, with this is actually to our east on day 10. But again, it will only take a very, very slight adjustment. You just have to move that high pressure a little bit in that direction to turn those winds into north or northeasterly. So it's day 10, it's a long way out, and we do need to watch what's happening there. There's the upper air temperatures. They look relatively mild, and the cold air is poised again just to the north of the UK. And then the GEM brings a lot of dry weather across the country on Friday. High pressure in control through the weekend as well. Actually, that's yesterday's GEM run. That's Monday, 15th of October. So that's not updated for some reason today. So I think better abandon that. Good job I noticed that. Monday, 15th of October 2018. So the GEM has not updated, certainly at Weather Central today. So we'll abandon that, get rid of the GEM, and we'll move on to CFS V2 finally. So this is what the CFS is showing. In terms of its 700 millibar height anomaly for November. It looks very unsettled and very westerly, with above average heights through much of the Atlantic, and they're going into southern and eastern parts of Europe, so loads of high pressure through there. Notice it's also extending through America, so that's a big ridge from America across the Atlantic into Europe. And then we have the below average heights, though, around Greenland and Iceland, so the jet stream is squeezed in between the two, and it looks very zonal. You would expect that to be pretty wet and windy, potentially, possibly quite a stormy November. But of course, this is the kind of signal we have for October. It never really has, it's never really turned that unsettled. Yes, we have had some bouts of wet and windy conditions, but I mean, overall, this October looks like it's shaping up to be a relatively anti-cyclonic month, and we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe we will unleash the Atlantic in November, but it'd be interesting to see whether the CFS is overdoing that Atlantic signal. And then this is what CFS V2 is showing for winter 2018-2019. If you want a cold winter, look away now. Get behind the SETI, get behind the Sage Long, because look at this. CFS is going for below average heights around Greenland and Iceland, and then it's going for this really big ridge across France, Spain, the Mediterranean. And so not only is this quite an unsettled signal with westerly flow, it's also a very, very mild signal as well. This would be a really mild winter if this came off, because we'll be pumping up the air from the southwest. The air will be moving in from the Azores, possibly even at times from North Africa. And so that's pretty brutal if you want a cold winter. That would be well, it would be a very mild winter. It would be exceptionally mild, potentially, maybe quite dry as well, especially so for southern parts of the country. Of course, there would be bouts of wind and rain at times, but with high pressure in such close proximity to the south across northern France, you would probably expect quite a dry winter there also. So very mild and dry appears to be what CFS V2 is forecasting for this winter, and that is a combination that can occur. Normally, when it's dry, you think that it would tend to be cold, and when it's mild, you will think it tends to be wet. But you can deviate from that. Sometimes you can get cold and wet winters. Sometimes you can get dry and mild winters. And a classic dry mild winter was actually 1975, 1976. That was a winter that occurred between two very hot summers. So I've spoken about this before. We went in the mid-70s. We went for a prolonged dry spell. And most people think of 1976 in the summer as being the drought. But actually the drought started at the end of 1974. So 74, 75 was a very mild but dry winter. And then we had a hot summer through the summer of 1975. Then we had another very mild and very dry winter for 75, 76. So we had two really dry winters, but they were mild. And then it finished up climaxing with that really hot summer in 76, and of course reservoirs just ran out of water. The rest is history. But it all started actually with the two really dry winters but preceded that summer, and the very hot summer of 1975 as well. Wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say we're in that kind of pattern, but we have had a hot summer for 2018. If the CFS is right, we're going to have a dry but very mild winter, and if we get another hot summer next year, then we could be in a bit of trouble in terms of the water supply. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. It's very speculative. And of course, the CFS is its default setup really with this model is westerly. So it could well be it's just reverting to its default, and it'll all look very different in a couple of months. It is prone to wild swings and changes. I've said basically it's a lousy model, and the best of times it is, but it's the one that we use a lot because it updates so regularly. But you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But it is interesting to ponder that after such a hot and dry summer, we're now having a dry autumn, seemingly. If we was to have another dry winter and then a hot summer next year, well, it could get a bit serious. But let's wait and see how things go over the next few weeks and months. In the more immediate time frame, it looks as though we're going to be keeping dry weather going. High pressure is going to be in control for the rest of October, really. Its position will be waxing and waning a little bit, but it looks like the second half of October will have a strong anticyclonic signal. Relatively warm over the coming weekend and then cooling down early next week. Do we get that cold snap in the last week of October? All on that will be revealed in the days ahead. Right, tomorrow we've got 5-day forecast, and we'll also have your regular week to 10-day update with no doubt a look at the Beijing Climate Centre for the next 40 days as well. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.